Ever come across something you couldn't explain? Something so eerie it stayed with you long after? Well, get ready, because these stories will send chills down your spine. If you liked it, don't forget to hit like, subscribe, and ring the bell for more creepy tales. Also, drop a comment. What time are you watching this? I'd love to know. Have you ever seen yourself but it wasn't quite you? Oh, it started when I moved into my new apartment. Everything about the place was fine except for the bathroom mirror. It was old. The kind you'd expect in a house decades older than the rest of the building. The edges were tarnished, speckled with black spots that refused to come clean. The first time I noticed something was off, I was brushing my teeth late at night. My reflection didn't move right. It was subtle at first, like the timing was just a fraction of a second behind. I'd lift my hand to my face, and the reflection's hand seemed to hesitate, then catch up. I told myself I was imagining it, tired from unpacking and adjusting to a new place. But then it got worse. One night I leaned in close to the mirror to rinse my mouth, and for a split second, I swear, my reflection smiled. I hadn't. I backed away, staring at the glass. My reflection was normal again, following my movements perfectly. I told myself it was just stress, sleep deprivation. But the next night, I woke to a faint tapping. The sound was coming from the bathroom. I got up, heart pounding, and turned on the light. The mirror was fogged over, even though I hadn't used the shower that night. Written in the condensation were 2 words. Let me. I stared at the message, and the faint outline of my own reflection appeared behind it. Except, it wasn't mine. The eyes were wrong. They were sharper, darker, and the smile was too wide. I stumbled back, nearly tripping over the doorframe. The reflection didn't move, it just stood there, grinning at me. The next morning I covered the mirror with a towel. I couldn't bring myself to look at it anymore, but no matter how tightly I secured the covering, the towel would be on the floor when I woke up, and the mirror would be fogged again. Each night, the messages grew stranger. Almost there. Let me through. You'll like it here. I tried avoiding the bathroom entirely, but on the 4th night, I heard it again, the tapping, louder this time. When I opened the bathroom door, the towel was gone. The mirror wasn't fogged this time. Instead, my reflection stood perfectly still, even though I wasn't moving. And then it raised its hand and tapped on the glass from the inside. I slammed the door and grabbed my keys. I drove aimlessly for hours until exhaustion forced me back. The mirror was gone the next day, just an empty spot on the wall where it had been. My landlord swore he hadn't removed it, but I didn't press the issue. I don't use mirrors anymore. I cover every reflective surface in my apartment. But sometimes, when I pass a window at night, I catch a glimpse of a face watching me from the other side. Have you ever seen a place that shouldn't be on the map? It was a weekend road trip, just me, my phone, and the open road. I wanted to clear my head, escape the noise of the city for a while. Somewhere along the way, my GPS started acting up. The screen flickered, glitched, and then recalibrated. A new route appeared, shorter by almost an hour. I was skeptical, but curiosity got the better of me. The detour led me down a narrow, overgrown road, the kind where trees arch overhead and block out the sun. My car's radio picked up nothing but static. The deeper I went, the more the road seemed to close in, the trees pressing closer, the air feeling heavier. And then I saw it. An old house stood at the end of the road. It looked abandoned, its roof sagging and windows dark. My GPS chirped suddenly. Arrived at destination. I hadn't put in a destination. I turned off the car and stepped out, the air unnaturally still, no birds, no wind, just silence. A sign near the house read, Marston Residence. I had no idea why my GPS led me there, but something about the house drew me in. The door was slightly ajar. Inside, everything was covered in a thick layer of dust. Faded wallpaper peeled from the walls, and broken furniture lay scattered across the floor. At first, it seemed like a normal, abandoned house. But then, I heard it. Static. It was faint at first, a low hum coming from deeper inside. I followed the sound, down a narrow hallway to a door that looked newer than the rest of the house. The static grew louder as I approached. I pushed the door open and stopped cold. The room was small, empty except for an old TV on a wooden stand. The screen flickered with static, casting a pale, flickering light. A single wooden chair sat in front of it, facing the screen. I should have turned around and left, but instead I stepped inside. As I got closer to the TV, the static began to shift. Shapes formed on the screen, blurry at first, but then clearer. It was me. I was standing in the room, staring at the TV, but then the version of me on the screen turned around and looked directly at the camera. I froze. The screen me smiled, a wide, unnatural grin that didn't belong to me. And then, the sound started. A voice crackled through the static. Stay a while. I turned to leave, but the door was gone. Just a blank wall where it had been. Panic set in as the room grew colder. The static on the screen got louder, deafening. The figure on the TV, the other me, stood up and started walking toward the screen, toward me. I don't remember how I got out. One moment I was in that room, the next I was back in my car, speeding down the road as fast as I could. When I checked my GPS again, the route was gone. No sign of the detour, no trace of the house. But last night, my TV turned on by itself. Static filled the screen, and in the faint glow, I saw a figure sitting in a wooden chair, watching, waiting. Have you ever seen someone who shouldn't be there? It started the night I moved into my apartment building, an old 6-story complex with narrow hallways and dim lighting. I had barely unpacked when I noticed something strange. The hallway stretched farther than I remembered. I could see the far end from my door, where it ended in a wall and a single flickering light. But tonight, there was someone standing there. A tall figure, motionless, shrouded in shadow. I froze. The figure didn't move. They were just standing, facing my direction. I thought maybe it was a neighbor, but something about the way they stood made my skin crawl. I looked away for a second to grab my phone, but when I glanced back, they were gone. The next morning, I brushed it off. I was tired, stressed from the move. It had to have been a trick of the light. But that night, the figure was back. This time, they were closer, still at the far end of the hall, but a step or two nearer. I called out, "Hello? Can I help you?" My voice echoed in the empty space. No answer. I decided to walk toward them, but with every step I took, they seemed to shift further away, keeping the same unsettling distance. The light above them flickered faster, casting strange, stuttering shadows across the walls. I turned and hurried back to my apartment. locking the door behind me. The next few nights I avoided the hallway as much as I could, but it didn't matter. One night, I woke to a soft tapping. At first, I thought it was from the window, but when I turned on the light, I realized it was coming from my door. Tip, tap, tap. "Who's there?" I called out, but no one answered. I peered through the peephole, and my stomach dropped. The figure was standing just outside my door. Up close, I could see them better. Their face was pale, featureless, like a mannequin smeared with ash. Their head tilted slightly, as though listening. I backed away, heart racing. The tapping stopped. When I looked through the peephole again, they were gone. The next morning, I told my landlord. He gave me a strange look. "You're on the 6th floor, right?" he asked. "Yeah." He hesitated, then said, "There used to be someone living on that floor. They passed away a long time ago. Some tenants say they see things, but it's just stories." That night, I packed a bag and decided to stay with a friend. As I was leaving, I glanced down the hallway one last time. The figure was standing there, right under the flickering light. But this time, their heads snapped up, and they started walking toward me. I didn't wait to see what would happen. I don't know what it was, or what it wanted, but sometimes when I'm alone in a quiet hallway, I swear I can hear the faint sound of footsteps, slowly coming closer. Have you ever stepped into a place and immediately wanted to leave? I was helping my friend Alex move into his new apartment, a cheap place he found in a crumbling old building downtown. No, it wasn't much. Creaky floors, peeling wallpaper, but the rent was next to nothing. I didn't question it, not at first. Most of the day was uneventful, hauling boxes up narrow stairs and unpacking in the dimly lit living room. It wasn't until later, after the sun had set, that we noticed something strange. There was a door at the end of the hallway neither of us remembered seeing before. It was plain, unmarked, with no lock or handle. Alex swore it wasn't there when he toured the place, but curiosity got the better of us. He gave it a push and it creaked open. The room inside was small, about the size of a walk-in closet. The walls were stark white, smooth and featureless. The strangest part, there were no corners. Every edge of the room curved gently into the next, creating a seamless, unnatural space. There were no windows, no light fixtures, yet the room glowed faintly, as if lit from within. "I guess it's storage," Alex said, his voice uncertain. But something about the room made my skin crawl. The air inside felt too still, too heavy. I turned to leave, but Alex stepped inside, running his hand along the curved wall. "Weird," he muttered. "It feels warm." That's what had happened. The door slammed shut behind him. I lunged for the handle, but there wasn't one. I pounded on the door, shouting his name, but the wood felt solid and cold under my hands. "Alex, are you okay?" His voice came from the other side, muffled and strange. "Yeah, I'm fine. The walls just changed." "What do you mean changed?" I don't know. They're moving. Wait, there's something here." The glow inside the room dimmed, shifting to a sickly green. His voice grew frantic. "I can't find the door, the walls. They're closing in." I threw my weight against the door, desperate to open it, but it didn't budge. And then the screaming started. It was a sound I'll never forget, raw and guttural, echoing in my ears long after it stopped. Suddenly, the door creaked open on its own. The room was empty. There was no sign of Alex. No sign of anything. The walls were still smooth and curved, glowing faintly white again, as if nothing had happened. I called the police, but they found no evidence of foul play. To them, Alex had just disappeared. I don't go near that building anymore, but sometimes I dream about the room. In my dreams, I hear him whispering from the other side of the wall, begging to me to let him out. Have you ever walked into a place that wasn't there the day before? It was a foggy night, the kind where the world feels smaller, muffled. I was driving home after a late shift. The highway stretched out endlessly in the haze. That's when I saw the sign glowing faintly in the mist. The Last Stop Café. I had never seen it before, but something about it felt familiar. The neon letters buzzed faintly, casting an eerie glow on the empty parking lot. My stomach growled, so I pulled in. Inside it was quiet, too quiet. The air smelled of burnt coffee and something faintly metallic. There were a few patrons scattered at the booths, but none of them looked up as I entered. The waitress approached, her uniform crisp but outdated, like something out of the 1950s. Her face was too pale, her smile stretched a little too wide. "Welcome," she said softly. "Sit anywhere you like." I chose a booth near the window, though the fog outside made it impossible to see anything. The menu was strange. There were no prices, just vague descriptions. The comfort you've lost, yesterday's regret, a future unseen. "What do you recommend?" I asked nervously. She tilted her head, her smile unwavering. "The house special is always a good choice." Before I could reply, she was gone. And moments later, a steaming plate appeared in front of me. I didn't see her bring it, and I didn't see anyone else in the kitchen. The food looked fine. Perfect even. Too perfect, the kind of glossy presentation you see in advertisements. I picked up my fork, but as I moved to take a bite, the lights flickered. The patrons around me all turned their heads at once. Their faces were blank, their eyes glassy and unfocused. I froze, the fork trembling in my hand. "Is everything okay?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. No one answered. But then I saw it. In the reflection of the window, behind me, something was standing at the counter. It was tall and gaunt, its body obscured by the shadows. Its head was tilted at an unnatural angle, as if it were trying to get a better look at me. I turned sharply, but there was nothing there. The waitress returned, still smiling. "Is something wrong?" she asked, her voice lilting like a melody just out of tune. I pushed the plate away. I should go," I muttered. Her smile faltered, just for a moment. And then she nodded. "Of course, but you'll be back. Everyone comes back." As I hurried out, I noticed something that stopped me cold. A wall near the door was covered in photographs. They were old and yellowed, hundreds of them. In every single one was the same cafe, the same booths, and the same eerie fog outside. And in the corner of one photo, I saw myself. I didn't stay to figure it out. I ran to my car and didn't look back. The next day, I went back to check, but there was no cafe. Just an empty lot. Cracked asphalt overgrown with weeds. I don't drive that stretch of highway anymore, but every once in a while, in the middle of the night, I smell burnt coffee and hear the faint hum of neon in the distance. And I know it's still out there, waiting. Have you ever seen someone and known they shouldn't be there? It was a long haul, one of those overnight drives that blurred the lines between exhaustion and a bad dream. I pulled into a rest stop off I-84, not because I needed to, but because something didn't feel right. My eyes were heavy, but it wasn't just that. There was this weight in the air, a sense that I shouldn't keep going. The lot was empty except for a single streetlight humming faintly overhead. It cast just enough light to show the chipped pavement and the shadowy outline of an old payphone by the bathrooms. I stepped out to stretch my legs, the cold air biting through my jacket. That's when I saw her. She was sitting on the curb. Barefoot, her hair hanging in dark, tangled strands over her face. She wore a pale dress that looked like it belonged in another century. Something a little girl might wear to church. But she wasn't a little girl. Her figure was too long, her limbs too angular. "Hey, you okay?" I called out. My voice echoed in the stillness. She didn't answer, didn't even flinch. Her head stayed down, her hands resting limply in her lap. But then, she started humming. It wasn't a song I recognized, just a low, tuneless hum that grew louder the closer I got. My skin crawled as I approached, but I couldn't stop myself. There was something wrong about her, but something even worse about leaving her there when I was a few feet away. She finally lifted her head. Her face wasn't right, her eyes were too wide, her mouth stretched into a slack grin that didn't match her expression, and her skin, it was pale, almost translucent, like she wasn't fully real. "Do you have the time?" she asked. Her voice was soft, but there was an edge to it that made my stomach turn. I checked my watch, but the numbers were flickering like a broken clock. "I'm not sure," I stammered. "Psst." She stood up so suddenly I nearly fell back. She was tall, much taller than I expected. "It's late," she said, her voice sharper now, almost angry. I took a step back, every instinct screaming at me to get to the truck. But then she pointed past me, toward the road. "They're coming," she whispered. Before I could ask what she meant, the humming started again. Not from her, but from everywhere. The street light flickered, casting long, warped shadows across the lot. My truck loomed behind me, but it looked wrong, distorted in the shifting light. I bolted. I didn't care if she was still behind me. I didn't care what was coming. I just needed to get out. I slammed the door shut and gunned the engine, not even bothering to check the mirrors. As I sped back onto the highway, my CB radio crackled to life. "Do you have the time?" the girl's voice asked. I didn't look back, and I didn't stop driving until the sun came up. Even now, whenever I pull into a rest stop at night, I hear that humming, faint but unmistakable, and I know she's still out there,